Boy, oh boy. This is the Digital World Podcast, folks, and I got some fire news for you today. Now, you want to stay tuned for this whole thing because this is something that if I was someone who had received the medicine, I would be upset. In which, if they've been lying to me about this whole time, then what else could they be lying about? And why weren't they transparent from the beginning? Now you may ask yourself, what are you talking about? Well, recently, the news came out that the CDC said, or the director of the CDC said, the overwhelming number of deaths, over 75% of deaths occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So these people were already unwell to begin with. And yes, really encouraging news in the context of this variant. This means not only just get your primary series, but get your booster. So they're over here advocating for more shots. But why do you want more shots if 75% of the people who die are people who have 4 or more comorbidities? This makes no sense. Okay? And here they're pay attention to these outcomes. The study from the CDC says among those 1.2 million people who completed their primary inoculation during December 2020 to October 2021, the severe COVID-associated outcomes came out to this percentage, which is extremely small, or death, which is extremely small. And it says risk factors for severe outcomes included age greater than 65 years, greater than or equal to 65 years, immunosuppressed, and 6 other underlying conditions. All persons with severe outcomes had at least one risk factor. 78% of people who died had at least 4. 78% of people who died had at least 4 risk factors. Folks, you know what this means? And to put some icing on that, listen to this. In isolation, we talk about isolation in the context of people who had a positive test and who know that you're infected. It says, now we have dozens of studies referenced on the CDC website that demonstrate that you are most infectious in the 1 to 2 days before your symptoms and the 2 to 3 days after your symptoms. So by 5 days after your symptoms, the vast majority of your contagiousness is really behind you. So then what's the whole point of doing a 10-day lockdown? Because when you have symptoms, right, your contagious part is already past you. And then 1 to 2 days or 2 to 3 days after your symptoms, you're contagious again. So within 5 days, folks, this is such a mess. And now conveniently, you're starting to be a little more transparent, but we're so far deep in this, people are not going to pull back because you've already done the damage. The fear has been inculcated into people's minds. And none of this rational data, rational thinking, and facts is going to change people's minds because they're hypnotized. They're in this trance of believing what you fed them for 2 years now. And especially when you tell me the overwhelming number of deaths of over 75% occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. This is what the director's saying. These people should be held accountable for this kind of stuff. That is not okay. And a Stanford epidemiology professor came out with some data that the survival rate for people under 20 is pretty much 100%, right? 13%? Laughable. This is absolutely laughable. And the data that they took here, I'll read it to you. So this previously published study was an analysis of seroprevalence antibody studies from 2020, which resulted in him being able to reveal the fatality rate for this variant, right? And this study was taken before all of these mass medicine programs. Okay, so these numbers apply to people who did not receive the medicine. And let me see here. I don't think it says how many people. Let's see. We're in the study. So it says an analysis of 25 surveys across 14 countries. Around 1 in 100,000. So it doesn't say how many people, but so that's something you got to keep in mind. If it's an extensive study of tens of thousands of people, that's a pretty big study, especially when you're talking about multiple countries. But look at these fatality rates, right? If you're under 20, it's basically nothing. Even in your 20s, hardly anything. 30s, nothing. 40s, nothing. 50s, 60s, it's not, folks, we're not even talking about 1% from 0 to 69 years old. Not even 1%. What are we doing giving medicines to young people? What are we doing? It makes absolutely no sense. Look at their fatality rate. Even in older individuals who are in the 40s to almost 70, it makes no sense. You're telling me we have to give medicines to all these people who have less than 1%, almost less than 0.7%. And you're talking about giving these people medicines. Okay, maybe if you're in your 70s, okay, maybe you'd consider it. But isn't that what influenza does too? Like, what are we doing here? This has nothing to do with health. That's what it is. And there's a greater agenda at hand and at play that wants to stick people with whatever is in those medicines. And when you look at numbers like this, you turn around and wonder what is going on. And let me show you. I have to point this out. Let's see. Because when you look at data like that, right, you want to compare different states that implemented draconian measures, right? So let's look at California. You see here, okay, they have draconian tyrannical laws. This is confirmed cases. So last year, January, they went up. This year in January, they went up, right? We see deaths in California. They were high last year in January, and they've pretty much stabilized all across. Now let's look at Florida. Florida, it's pretty much, you see small peaks, but the peak in January of last year wasn't as great as the one in California, right? So California, having the more severe, stricter measures, had more confirmed cases last year in January. Then we see a small spike here around summer, and then it spikes again along with California. Then we see the deaths, okay? The deaths pretty much stabilized. It peaks over here, but nothing like California's, or it's similar to. So when we're comparing Florida and California, one has severe measures and the other lets you live your life. And you look at the data, and it's hardly any different, or Florida has a lot less cases and a lot less deaths. Now you tell me, does this have to do with health? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the data doesn't lie to you. It's showing you we have almost 2 years worth of information. Folks, wake up. And this is a video where I'm showing you information. I'm showing you data. And I'm showing you the information that's being posted. So what are we talking about here, you know? Spread this video far and wide. Let people know, because a lot of people, even when you show them this, they'll do their own thing, right? They're in a trance. Other people, you show them this and they're like, how could this be? Some people just simply don't know. And if you show this information to them and show them that none of this makes sense, hopefully that makes them, get that light bulb switched on. And that's what we're talking about today. And this is why I do and keep doing this channel, because I need to make sure I reach out to as many people as I can and show them this information. So, without further ado, this is the Digital World Podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.